Exactly 100,000 years ago, on an unnamed night, one of our ancestors sat at the entrance of their cave. Their stomach was full, the nearby predators were distant for the night, and they had done everything required to survive. But that night, a strange glitch occurred in their brain, a glitch unlike anything any living creature had ever experienced. For millions of years, the animal kingdom had survived on just two questions: what will I eat? And what will eat me? But that night, in that darkness, that human asked themselves the most dangerous and most fascinating question in the universe: why am I here? And what does all of this mean? That night, humanity experienced its very first existential crisis. And from that moment on, our minds would never truly find peace again. In the process, scientists call the cognitive revolution. A strange mutation occurred in the Homo sapiens brain. Our center for abstract thinking and planning, the prefrontal cortex, grew uncontrollably. This growth gave us a massive power, the ability to predict where the prey would go or exactly when the winter would arrive. But evolution made a fatal miscalculation. A brain that can see the future so clearly must inevitably see its own unavoidable end: death. An animal sees the death of its prey, but it cannot imagine its own demise. But the moment a human looked at a dead companion, they saw their own future in the mirror. To cope with the overwhelming terror of this realization, to keep from losing its mind, our brain desperately had to manufacture a defense mechanism. The name of that mechanism was meaning. Think about the profound tragedy of this shift. Other animals are beautifully locked in the eternal present. A wolf does not lose sleep over what it did last year. A bird does not suffer from anxiety about its retirement. They simply exist. But humans, we became the only creatures trapped in a prison of time. Our minds became capable of dragging the regrets of the past into today, while simultaneously mourning a future that hasn't even happened yet. We became haunted by the concept of our own temporary nature. The moment we invented tomorrow, we also invented the dread of what happens when our tomorrows run out. We can see clear evidence of ancient humans fighting this dread from the archaeological records left behind. In caves dating back roughly 100,000 years, scientists discovered processed red ochre stones and perforated seashells made into the oldest known jewelry. Biologically, these objects had absolutely zero survival value. They didn't satisfy hunger, and they didn't protect against predators. But psychologically, it was a massive revolution. The first human to wear that necklace or paint their body with pigment was launching a rebellion against the default settings of nature. They were broadcasting a deeply psychological message. I am not just an animal made of flesh and bone. I have an identity. I am here, and I matter. When our ancestors stopped simply abandoning their dead to nature, their minds were hunting for an answer to that haunting question: if everything ends, why did we live? Religion, mythology, and rituals were born entirely to fill this deep, hollow void. But it didn't stop with simple rituals. Anthropologists speak of something called terror management theory. It suggests that almost everything we call civilization is actually a giant shield we built to protect ourselves from cosmic dread. We built tribes, then cities, then empires. We created social status, accumulated wealth, and chased after legacy. Why? Because if we can attach our names to something grand, something that outlasts our physical bodies, then maybe, just maybe, we can trick ourselves into believing we are immortal. For thousands of years, we bypassed these questions around campfires with mythological stories. We blamed storms on the anger of the gods and credited our existence to a Mother Earth. These stories were enough to soothe our brains. That is, until writing was invented and humanity crashed into the great intellectual turning point known as the Axial Age. The first written existential crisis in history was carved into stone tablets 4,000 years ago in the epic of Gilgamesh. When his closest friend died, King Gilgamesh panicked, carving these words onto the tablets: "My friend has turned to dust, and will I, like him, lie down, never to rise again?" Gilgamesh abandoned his kingdom and his palace to chase after immortality, to chase the very purpose of his existence. Then, around 500 BC, something unprecedented happened in three completely disconnected regions of the world. Socrates in Greece, Buddha in India, and Lao Tzu in China stood up at the exact same time. They rejected the old myths. They forced humanity to look inward, saying, "Stop looking for the meaning of life in the gods above. Look inside yourselves." The existential crisis had officially become a formal discipline. But then came the greatest disconnect of all, the Industrial Revolution. For millennia, even when we were anxious about our existence, we were deeply connected to the dirt, the seasons, and the stars. We were part of the cosmic rhythm, but suddenly we pulled ourselves out of the natural world. We built concrete boxes, locked ourselves inside under artificial lights, and regulated our entire lives by the mechanical ticking of a clock tower. We ceased to be creators of meaning and became cogs in a machine. This is the exact moment when the ancient existential crisis morphed into a modern epidemic. When you strip away the spiritual connection to nature and replace it with repetitive, mechanical labor, the void inside the human brain doesn't just whisper anymore, it screams. Philosophers called it nihilism, the terrifying realization that the universe might not care about us at all. Today, 100,000 years have passed since that first night in the cave. We built skyscrapers, we walked on the moon, and we split the atom. But the strange thing is, that hollow feeling that consumed our ancestor on that nameless night has never gone away. We tried to drown it out with consumerism. We tried to numb it with endless digital noise and 24-hour connectivity. But noise is not a cure for silence. Whenever we find ourselves staring at the ceiling in the dead of night, whenever we feel an inexplicable loneliness in the middle of a crowded room, it isn't actually us living in the modern world. It is that ancient software still running deep within our brains. It is the ghost of that first human still sitting at the edge of the cave, looking out into the dark, wondering what the stars are trying to say. We are the only creatures designed by the universe to question its own existence. And perhaps the true purpose of living is not to find a definitive, comforting answer to this question, but simply to be brave enough to sit with it. So, what is it that you are actually searching for in the void you are running from tonight?